Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It's my favorite number day. It's the 13th of March, 2022. I think it's Daylight Savings Day at approximately 3 p.m. my time. And again, just another wonderful revelation of this tidal wave that is continuing to build. And there's just so much energy behind us of people that are obviously desperate for the truth. And I'd say the ratio is now far exceeding those that just want to obviously judge or hate or kind of presume who they think I am without any knowledge or wit about them, which is fine. That's the free market, man, and I'm bringing it to you, and I'm all about delivering information to all of you that we all need to know if we actually care about a country of life, liberty, and justice for all, with the integrity of law, where the system is supposed to work the way it was designed through separation of powers, where we don't live under the thumb of massive, massive, massive corruption. The corruption that we are underneath the thumb of is insane, and everybody is trying to find answers. A lot of people are trying to find answers. A lot of people assume that they know it's rigged, but nobody knows who did what, when, and how. I think that's why we're attracting hundreds of thousands of people. I think that, quite frankly, we're approaching 1 million views on hashtag the con, which is extremely important. And as always, I'll mention up at the top of this, please go to our website at www.thecon.tv. You can see a lot of information there, and you can rent the con on Apple TV, Amazon, even though I know that Amazon is still having some problems, Microsoft, and Vimeo, and then you can also get it for free if you go to your library and you do a new mechanism, a new platform called Hoopla. You can watch it for free with commercials. So a lot of choices. I think it's $2 per episode for what is now probably north of $50 trillion truth that has everybody under their thumb, and we're all pigs being led to slaughter. And there's going to be probably 1 out of 10 of us that refuse to be played any longer, and that's who I'm trying to reach first and foremost. And eventually everybody else will come on board because that's just how humanity operates. So, look, what's the message today that's different than yesterday, that's different than what'll be tomorrow? Obviously, they're all pretty much the same exact thing, but it's just getting more and more clear to me that what's resonating with all of you is that this is a struggle between good and evil, period, okay? The biblical references work, the Hollywood references work, and I'll drop a few of those in a minute, because for those of you who want to kind of second guess, well, who is this guy? He's not telling me anything. Okay, what do you want me to tell you? You want me to talk about the Commodity Futures Modernization Act? How about I talk about Phil Gramm in 1998 and what the President's Working Group did to be able to get rid of Graham Leach Bliley, and ultimately how that impacted derivatives market into what end? What about we talk about what the nation of notional derivatives are? Or we could talk about, quite frankly, what policy of deregulation was that means in the context of reps and warranties, and what that does going back to the Great Depression that we learned when we did the Pecora hearing that led to actually securities in the business models of capitalism being able to function in a way like our airplanes would, so that they could fly, or our planes could, so they could float, or our trains could, so that they could run properly, because we used to have a system and a society that would literally be able to put somebody on the moon, or be able to invade D-Day and get rid of a guy like Hitler, because that's who we were. But we're not that anymore, okay? What we are is a mafia state. Literally, we're a mafia state with guys in pinstripes that come out of the Ivy League that have high-priced attorneys, and they work behind LLCs and all of these fictional depictions of operations on boards where they can actually destroy all of us. It's beyond Orwellian. I just happened to see a headline with one of my favorite writers. I haven't read it yet, but Matt Taibbi said George Orwell was right. No shit. That's all this has ever been. And again, in that reference, I'm the woman in the 1984 commercial that aired during the 1986 Super Bowl that launched Apple's Macintosh, when all of the freaking idiots were sitting on the pew watching the big brother on the screen spew a bunch of bullshit, and I showed up with the freaking hammer and I throw it against the freaking the theater screen, and I smash it into 1 million pieces, because that's what Patrick Lovell does. I'm truth bombing the con. Why? Because I believe in liberty and justice for all and the integrity of law, and I can't stand being lied to. I hate liars. I know the difference between good and evil. So let's go back to biblical references. What is evil? People that celebrate Christianity or profess Christianity have an answer. That's not that too dissimilar than the one that came from Judaism. That's not too dissimilar from the one that exists in Islam, and probably all of the other religions and different sort of irony. Deception is evil. To lie and to steal and to cheat and to betray and to diabolically maneuver all of those things into place for power is quite frankly what power has always done, which is why we have the United States of America. The revolution to get rid of King George III by patriots was to basically get rid of tyranny so that we could operate under a system of separation of powers where nobody had absolute control. So the judiciary operated independently from the judicial branch and the executive branch, all of which would work in unison on behalf of the people, i.e. of, by, and for the people. We don't have that anymore. Finance, Wall Street, the money, basically pulled a hijacking decades in the process, decades in the making, and they created what we call cognitive capture and the revolving door. And so what we did was we got rid of the barriers that created the institutions that are supposed to protect us from a crime racket, and ultimately they got complete control. So what they did was they put a freaking, let's call it a ghost figure, flying the 747 on the USS 747, and they're going to fly us into the Twin Towers because we're all expendable. And the fact is, they've already done it. They've already done it a bunch of times since 2000. They did it in the dot-com bubble. They did it in the Enron era bubbles. We had 9/11. Then ultimately we have all of this makeshift war against terror, which wasn't a war against terror because Saudi Arabia got away with 9/11 and everything that constitutes. And then ultimately Wall Street ended up creating this financial terrorism through the housing bubble that destroyed the middle class after we destroyed the middle class back in the 70s and the 80s because we killed the golden goose, and that was ultimately because of globalism. This is all baked and predicated on neoliberalism, 4 decades of financialization, which is just smoke and mirrors to maintain this huge disparity of wealth where the guys at the very top get to game everybody else. It's not supply and demand. It's not free markets. It's not freedom and liberty and justice for all. It's corporate fascism undergirded by a criminal syndicate. Do I walk on water? Can I part the Red Sea? No. But am I trying in my own way to kind of create the confluence of both of those? You bet your ass I am. Because liberty and justice for all is the end game, and the only way you get that is with the integrity of law. So if the freaking the waters of the Red Sea part, it's because we're trying to get rid of the pharaohs. We want to drown the pharaohs, and then ultimately the resurrection to create harmony and a paradise in a way that basically we all have common sense and fairness and liberty and justice for all and dynamism, and you get a piece of the American dream. The only way that happens is in an honest system. When the power is absolutely corrupt, they create a legal code to authorize it and a moral code to glorify it. You're getting played. The greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the world he didn't exist, and they're pissing on your head telling you it's right. People, I've got the truth, okay? I need you. You need me. We need to walk arm in arm. And my vision is a peaceful movement to create justice. We have the systems in place. We have the experts who know how to do this in a way that if millions of us could come together with a critical mass, we could get rid of this evil injustice. But here's the thing. And I'm going to say it, just in context of what happens literally in the court with millions of people that tried to save their homes and they got bulldozed. There's a reason for that. Because you can't fight on your own. Listen, there were millions and millions of illegal foreclosures based on documentation fabrication that was, used by servicers and foreclosure mills and all of these entities within the judicial system to basically steal homes, okay? And the reason why they were able to do that was because they were getting paid by a higher power, which is the United States government. There was also some other aspects of it, but insurance and the Federal Reserve and the Treasury, they're all tied to this thing. This isn't hyperbole. This isn't Alex Jones, talking about all sorts of fucking horse shit. The thing is, when you are an investigative journalist, and I've always been a producer, but I had to become an investigative journalist to do this, you actually have to go get evidence. You've got to get the stuff from the people. You got to have a grand understanding of the symphony. You got to be able to create a narrative to put it together to make people understand what actually is happening. Because I am absolutely convinced, if you're sitting on a corner and you see an old lady walking and some guy comes up and steals her purse, I think 90% of us would actually try to stop that guy from getting away. I really do. But you can't fight what you can't see. What if for example, somebody came, like let's say there was I'm not exactly what the perfect analogy is in this situation, but let's say this woman is walking. She goes to an ATM to put her ATM card, to this bank and this financial system where she's supposed to get her money. But instead, her money's gone. Poof, it was stolen. Well, you don't know who stole it in that particular scenario. Well, I do. And that's what I'm trying to get to your attention to understand. So, listen, 13 is a huge number for me. Okay, 13 was really what propelled me on this grand adventure, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But I want to tell you a couple of things of why 13 is important, because most people associate 13 with Friday the 13th and bad luck and all that sort of thing, which ironically is probably what exactly is I've been living through ever since, and that's the paradox of this whole thing. But 13 literally means the 13 principles of God in Judaism. It also means the balance of nature, and it also means revolution. Okay? And so ultimately, there were 13 colonies in the United States. 13 is all over the dollar bill. So 13 colonies, and our founding fathers were part of the Freemasons. The Masons were basically the opposite of what they created guilds that were the antithesis of the power of the monarchy and the church. That's why we created separation of powers, because our founding fathers were so distrustful of power. Now, they had all sorts of problems. There were white men that had slaves and all of those things that came with it. But of course, when you put it on paper, it leads to the likes of Martin Luther King, 200 and some odd years later, talking about, I just want the country to live true to what it put on paper. Come on, this is in order to form a more perfect union. We had the revolution, we had the Civil War, we had the Civil Rights Movement, we had, obviously D-Day and, the defeat of fascism. Look, America hasn't always been perfect, but America's been probably on the more right side of things than any other country that I'm aware of, more consistently. And it's our turn to be able to step into history and be able to make this work for our generation. I have the answers of the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that just equates to massive, massive corruption. If you believe in the light, if you believe in truth, if you believe in justice, you have to come on board this movement to be able to purge corruption, because they're pissing on our heads, telling us rain, and they've gotten incredibly sophisticated using the institutions of legitimacy, whether it's finance, Wall Street, academia, Ivy League. It's the new aristocracy. And if you're an American, you can't trust power, corrupt power, and it's your job, your destiny, your purpose as an American to not let that happen. That's who I am. And so in the end, you've got two choices, man. You've got either corruption or you've got white supremacy. The way I always try to set this whole thing up was, look, there's two columns of our soul. On one side, you've got character, dignity, and integrity. Then on the other side, you've got complicity, duplicity, and complicity. Everybody's got to make decisions, and they got to skew one way or the other depending on the situation. Those of you who are playing ball with corruption, you know who you are. I'm sure you feel sick about it. Or some of you do. Some of you love it. Some of you think there's nobody in hell anybody's going to be able to stop you. You might be right. Nobody has been able to do it yet. But here's the thing. We have now built over 500,000 views on hashtag Patrick Lovell. We've built over 800,000 views on hashtag The Con. Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs The Con is on YouTube. And now people are starting to get it. You watch The Con, you get to understand exactly who did what, when, and how, and who covered it up. And then you're no longer a complete vulnerable person that believes people like Barack Obama on one side or Donald Trump on the other. They're both pieces of this giant puzzle, and they're both playing you, honestly, for different ends. What I'm trying to do is bring us all together so that we can repurpose the United States with the resurrection to rebuild integrity, liberty, and justice for all. Onwards and upwards.